I said what I said. They're going to be on a tear next year because the Brady-Belichick debate is not over. Yes, I am putting the New England Patriots at number 5 in my power rankings going into next season. You look at Tom Brady winning the Super Bowl. That lit a fire under Bill Belichick's ass. He had no money to spend, had no free agents to bring in. He had 8 opt-outs. This guy was basically handicapped last year and one of the most unprecedented seasons that there could possibly be. And I know everybody's going to blast it. Oh, my God, look at the excuses he's making up. He's got Cam Newton, this, and that. I'll tell you guys right now, the conviction and the fact that Bill Belichick has spent the most money he ever has in free agency in the past decade. He basically did it within the first 36 hours of the league opening the gates, bro. Yeah, basically first 36 to 48 hours. Like, he was on a tear. Matthew Judon, Kendrick Bourne, Gachow. I mean, he brought in so many players. He's more than likely going to have the best tight end tandem, not the 2 best tight ends before y'all start tripping, the best tight end tandem in the league in Hunter Henry. You've obviously got Jonnu Smith. These guys are both quick. They're big. They're physical. They can serve you well in the running lanes. Obviously, they're going to serve you well in the passing lanes. But let's talk about Cam Newton. I know a guy that you think is washed up, and I still have questions about him as well. But you really have to take a look at the season, man. And I know everybody's going to think I'm chopping excuses here, but you've got COVID for 4 games. We can't deny that Cam Newton came out of the gates hot. And yes, that is a story tale that he's had throughout his career, but the guy was in a different system. It was in an unprecedented season. If you want to say it's excuses, that's fine, because in reality it is. But he had nobody to throw to. He had nobody to play with. He had the defense, which was at a bare minimum, it felt like. You didn't have Patrick Chung, who just retired. You didn't have Dante Hightower. You know, you bring in so many guys to get you fired up and to get you ready to go into this next season. I think the conviction from Bill Belichick is there. I think the defense is without question there. If Cam Newton comes out and stinks it up and we have to see a Jared Stidham, then I will pull back on this. But I am banking on Cam to be at least a B quarterback, because you can't tell me that Bill Belichick, with a normal offseason, bringing in these weapons, and who Bill is, being arguably the greatest coach of all time, one of the greatest or the greatest defensive coach of all time, you don't think he could at least make Cam Newton, working with that staff, at least a B minus quarterback? I think a B quarterback can win the Super Bowl. You don't need tremendous things out of Cam Newton. I'm put the Patriots at number 5, man. At number 4, you still got Aaron Rodgers. You still got Devontae Adams. I think you overpaid a little bit for Aaron Jones, but when you look at the value that he actually brings to that offense and what the Packers more than likely would have been without a guy that was 4th overall in the league in rushing, 7th overall in scrimmage yards, 7th to 10th, somewhere around there. I don't specifically know, but he was up there in the top 10 in scrimmage yards. And the division as well did improve a little bit. So I'm not getting nervous for the Packers, but the Packers have stood pat at this trade deadline, which isn't necessarily a surprise because we know of the money that they've had to spend. But I still feel like you cannot write this team off, because they still, within the last 2 seasons, rookie head coach campaign for Matt LaFleur and the sophomore year, both in the NFC Championship, both extremely underperforming in the NFC Championship, actually, if you ask me. But I feel like they still have questions at the key parts of the team with offensive linemen, wide receiver. You even look at the secondary. And like I said, I've been tugging and pulling with the Rams, and I know people are going to fire me up about it, but Aaron Rodgers still does not leave me with the same amount of questions that Matthew Stafford does at this point in time.
True.
You see the Packers losing Corey Linsley, the elite center, probably the best center in the NFL, losing the linebacker in Christian Kirksey. You lose Jamal Williams as well, but you did, like I said. But why in the hell are you bringing back Kevin King? I mean, he is literally the sole – he's not the sole reason, but he is a very contributing factor as to why you did not go to the Super Bowl last year. I love bringing back Robert Tonyan, 11 touchdowns last year as a tight end, double-digit touchdowns as a tight end. That's not something you extremely hear of.
And it seemed like nobody cared either.
Exactly, and Bob Tonyan was up there. I want to say he might have led the league, was up there around Kelsey in touchdown passes for tight ends. So this guy can ball. But Green Bay, again, as of today, has stood pat in free agency. And yes, we knew they weren't going to be able to do much, like I said, considering the money. But also, it isn't like Green Bay won't be contending for a title next year, but the Vikings and Lions, who are in the division, slightly improved, at least I feel like, but they should be better than they were last year at the very least, speaking of the Vikings and the Lions. And with teams like the Bucs and the Rams, I see them getting outplayed late in the season, which is why I don't have them higher in my power rankings. I'm sticking with the Packers at number 4. At number 3 on the list, again, I said what I said. I've got the Kansas City Chiefs coming in at number 3 on my power rankings. And the Super Bowl told me a lot. The Super Bowl told me that these guys did not have an offensive line. They did not that they didn't have an offensive line because people were hurt, but they didn't have any depth there. You look at Mitchell Schwartz and Eric Fisher getting out of town, which, you know, a lot of fans were concerned about because they were the cornerstone pieces of that line. But with getting rid of them, they cleared 18.3 million actually of the total 55 they were able to clear in free agency. You bring in Joe Thuney, who's one of the best linemen in the league, added to Kansas City. Since he was drafted 78th overall in 2016 by the Patriots, nobody in the NFL has played more snaps at left guard than him. And since 2017, he's 3rd in the NFL in pass block win rate, never missed a game in his career. And speaking of pass block win rate, I actually got the definition of that because I know we hear it, but okay, what does that really mean? That's his ability. And just think about this, because the amount of time is insane in the NFL. He has the ability, he's the 3rd best in the NFL to hold his blocker for at least 2.5 seconds. If you've been watching football, you know how long 2.5 seconds is, especially for a quarterback. Anybody in the NFL, he is able to hold his block for 2.5 seconds at the bare minimum on his guys. Since 2017, he's the 3rd best at doing it. Like I said, since 2016, nobody has played more snaps at the left tackle position than him, left guard position. Then you look at Kyle Long, a guy who's got football in his blood. We see Howie Long, 20th pick in the 2013 draft. Speaking about Kyle Long, Pro Bowler for 3 straight seasons in the NFL. And you look at Chris Long as well. You remember Chris Long in the NFL for a decade, won a couple Super Bowls, was an absolute boss man on the end of the line. I mean, he reminded me of like a Khalil Mack or like a Fletcher Cox. He was just that mean, that demanding. He was going to get his no matter what it took for him in the NFL. And you look at Kyle Long, man, he has played almost 4,800 snaps in his career. He's been called for holding 7 times. Almost 4,800 snaps in his career. The man has been called for holding 7 times. That's an average of once a season for what he's got under his belt for the NFL. But the good thing about him is that he was actually able to play at the left. Let's see here. I want to say it was, just to make sure I have it correctly, because this was a great stat about him. Let's see. It doesn't look like I threw it in, but he was able to actually, no, here we go. With most of his time at guard, but he played tackle the entire 2015 season with Chicago and actually went to the Super Bowl. So this guy is versatile. The Chiefs could move him around on the offensive line if they need to. Now, here's the big thing about Kansas City, which is you got to realistically start looking at what the Chiefs are going to be able to do in free agency within the coming years. They were in the mix for Trent Williams, but Patrick Mahomes' contract was the reason why they weren't really able to move ahead on him. Because if you take a look back at everything that's coming for the Chiefs for the next few years, Mahomes' contract is staring you right in the face. I've got the Buffalo Bills. Yes, you heard me correctly, ladies and gentlemen. The Buffalo Bills are my number 2 team going into next year. We saw what happened when Josh Allen skyrocketing, almost 40 touchdowns, 10 picks, over 4,500 yards. And PFF actually gave the offensive line for the Bills 10th overall, and Allen was able to play that well. You got them re-signing Williams. You got them re-signing Feliciano. So you keep the continuity there on the offensive line to keep Josh Allen comfortable and trusting his offensive line. We've seen it a little bit, especially oddly enough with Tom Brady last year, throwing those bad interceptions, not trusting his offensive line, not trusting a rookie center or maybe a rookie guard, tackle, whatever the case may be. You know, if you don't trust your offensive line, it's going to give you fits as the season goes on. But let's look at the fact that Josh Allen has improved every year. 100 passer rating last year. This guy was barely completing 50 to 55% of his passes the first 2 years in the NFL, and then absolutely took off. I think here's why. Obviously, you look at Stephon Diggs coming in. Some people think he was the best wide receiver in the NFL, led the NFL in receiving yards. I mean, one of the best route runners out there. We don't have to sit here and harp on Stephon Diggs, but a move that I love seeing them pick up in free agency, which is really what makes me want to put them at the 2 spot. Got another one coming after this one. It's going to be Emmanuel Sanders. When he got signed with the Saints, I was super excited. This is a guy that's had Drew Brees, Peyton Manning, Jimmy Garoppolo, and now you're going to have the pleasure of Josh Allen throwing to you in your career. I mean, what more can you ask for from that? You win a Super Bowl, go to a Super Bowl with Peyton Manning. So he's already got that experience to run deep in the playoffs, what it's like when the tension gets running high, when the blood pressure gets running high. And the Saints didn't get a whole lot of use out of him. You know, he fell down with COVID, and the Saints going through everything they did with the season, the injuries, changes on the roster. You still got Cole Beasley in there as well, a guy who had a career year coming into his 9th or 10th season, almost 1,000 yards, and he really flew under the radar. People were kind of trying to hype him up, talking about more catches than this guy and more touchdowns than Julio Jones. And I was like, well, y'all know Julio Jones hasn't even scored 10 touchdowns in a season, right? Like, come on, guys. Like, we know who Cole Beasley is. He's a stud on this team, and it feels like John Brown didn't even leave when you look at the receiver core. Before we move on from the Bills, man, bringing in Matt Breida. We know the Bills were bad, and you touched on it. They had no consistent running game outside of Josh Allen, bottom 3rd in the league in total rush yards and yards per game, and they were bottom 10 in yards per carry. And we just saw how the Bills struggled late overall in the playoffs last year, asking Josh Allen, a young guy, to do everything. That's how you burn out these guys quick. That's how you have, you know, you look at Deshaun Watson's injury report. It's a shock he's even still playing in the NFL. You look at Andrew Luck surviving 7 years as a number 1 pick and getting him beat. That is not going to work for you in the NFL. And overall, man, Josh Allen, the way he was able to skyrocket last year really shows you that he has got what it takes to be an elite quarterback in this league. The only thing I feel like holding them back is going to be the defense, because they weren't what they were the season before. But all in all, I do have the Bills at number 2. And I think if it's not this year for the Super Bowl, as crazy as it sounds putting them at number 2, I think we can guarantee a Super Bowl trip out of the Buffalo Bills next season. My number 1 is going to be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Like I mentioned earlier, not a whole lot you can say about this team, man. Returning 22 of 22 starters. You got Tom Brady graciously restructuring contract after contract after contract to continue winning at scale. The man has won more Super Bowls than any NFL franchise in the league. And another thing, you like, how can you hate Brady? You have him restructuring his contract to get these young guys into the mentality, to get them into the winning conditions, to get them into the competitiveness that it takes when you get later in the season. He just wants to share that with them, let them experience that, and overall let that be a part of their game that they've been able to partake in while having a career in the NFL. I mean, you bring back Shaq Barrett, Levante David, Mike Evans is still going to be there. We don't know about AB yet. Chris Godwin is coming back. We mentioned Tom Brady, and